I think just don't question yourself. That was I think my biggest obstacle was sort of the imposter syndrome thing. And, there's a lot of people out there doing this. I didn't realize it at the time. I felt like I was on an island. And then I started going, I went to a conference in DC for the VELA Fund. And then we were a YAS Prize semifinalists this year. And so I got to connect with a bunch of people through that. And this is being done everywhere. And you can find somebody that's doing what you want to do. You just got to reach out. I sent cold emails, and I have had some amazing mentors because of that. I guess my biggest advice is to stay confident, stay true to yourself, and reach out for help, because there are others doing this. The National Microschooling Center is a great resource. I'd be happy to help or direct you somewhere that can help you. And do it, because this is the future of education. I really believe this.
Americans are capable of achieving extraordinary things when they have the freedom and opportunity to do so. This is American Potential.
Welcome to the American Potential Podcast. I'm the host, David Fromm. While kids are growing up, some have moments where they see someone doing a job and it sparks an interest in them. Maybe it's a video of someone building a tiny home, or a nurse who helped them through a tough time. And suddenly, they know what they want to be when they grow up. Well, today's guest had several of those moments during her time in school, and it inspired her to step into the classroom. She started out in the public school system, but due to an incident during her time there, she needed to leave and open her own school. We talk a lot about school choice in this podcast because we've heard firsthand how some kids just don't thrive sitting in a traditional classroom. Some need to be out in nature, learning hands-on, and others need a totally different learning environment. But due to this teacher's experience, she saw that the kids in her community needed another option. And today, she's here to tell us about the school she started. I want to welcome Mary Jo Fairhead, who is founder and director of Onward Learning, located in Martin, South Dakota. Mary Jo, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Hey, before we get started, sometimes I like to learn a little bit about our guests, and I understand that you used to rodeo. Is that true?
It is true.
That's awesome. Well, for those of our guests who aren't as familiar with it, like how'd you get into it, and what was it like?
Well, I grew up on my family's ranch. My parents raised cattle and horses. So I was riding a horse from the time I could walk, maybe even before that. And my dad was sort of a rodeo star of sorts, I guess, in our area. And it was something we shared. And so, I roped, and I ran barrels and did pole bending and kind of did it all. I also did like quarter horse shows as well and showed horses. So it was a big part of my life for a long time.
That's fabulous. Yeah, I'm kind of envious. That's pretty darn wonderful. So you felt inspired to become a teacher. So the teachers that you had, I mean, how did they kind of light that spark for you?
Yeah, so I grew up going to a really, really small school. Out here, we call them country schools. They're, they're part of the public school district, but they're a lot smaller. So my school I think there was like 52 kids, K through 8, and multi-age classrooms. So we had 2 or 3 grades in each classroom, and pretty small class sizes, as you can imagine. But my teachers were just wonderful people. When I look back, I don't remember a single teacher in my elementary years that wasn't just a really good person. And, when you're surrounded by people like that, you want to be like them, especially when you're a kid. So I had a lot of that. And then I also had an aunt who was more like a sister. She lived with us when I was little, and she became a teacher, and I looked up to her, and I still do look up to her. She's no longer teaching, but she was a big inspiration too for me going into education.
So when you decided you started teaching, and so what was your first year like, and what'd you learn from that initial experience?
It was interesting. So, as I said, I came from a rural area, very small school, and then my first teaching job was at one of the largest high schools in the state of South Dakota.
Oh.
Yeah. So I had anywhere from 24 to 32 kids in each of my classes. I taught high school. So I had like 7 periods of that many kids. And there were nearly that many in my whole school in one period. So it was a learning experience for sure. It was a great experience. Everything that I have experienced as an educator has led me to where I am today, whether it was hard or easy or in between. But that was kind of really my first taste of understanding that, not every kid got to grow up in the type of school that I got to grow up in. And it was a whole different ballgame. I filled in, so I came in the middle of the school year. I graduated in December from college, and I started my job at Stevens High School in Rapid City in January. And I had come in for a teacher who had been let go in the middle of the year. And so it was a pretty hard situation to step into, but also the kids were really excited to have somebody that they kind of liked. So it was also very encouraging for me and gave me some confidence right out of the gate. And I had a great principal that was really supportive as well. But then within a couple of years, they started making some changes. And for instance, they started releasing the kids early on Wednesdays at 1:00 so that teachers could get together and do these, they call them PLC groups. And basically the purpose of those was, and this came from, it wasn't just district level, it came from the state and beyond, but the purpose of those was to develop pacing guides, essentially, where every teacher in the district that was teaching say world history, I taught world history, all the world history teachers, they wanted to be teaching the same thing at the same time throughout the district. So that if there was a child who transferred from one school to another, that they would just hop right in and it would be seamless, essentially. The problem with that was we're a huge school district. There was only maybe 1% of our population that was transferring in and out. So it wasn't a big portion of our kids. And it was just not realistic. I mean, if you're going to be teaching in an authentic way, you're going to teach to your students, not to a pacing guide. So I began to get a little frustrated at that point where they were taking our most attended day and chopping it in half for us to do things that I felt weren't necessarily good or impactful for our kids. But overall, Stevens was a pretty good experience and I learned a lot.
When did you decide to leave teaching, or at least teaching in the public school?
So I moved home. I got married and moved home back to the reservation where I'm from. Or near the reservation where I'm from. And my decision to quit teaching happened, there were two incidences, I guess. I was teaching middle school science, and it was the day before Christmas, or Christmas break, and the principal had decided to have a party in the gym for the kids, which was exciting. All the kids were really excited. We were going to have movies and, popcorn and treats and games, and it was going to be a fun day. But she also decided that there were certain kids who weren't going to be able to attend this party. And those were the kids that had missing assignments. The issue I had with that, there were a lot of issues I had with that, but the main issue I had with that was the kids that had the missing assignments were the ones that a lot of them didn't have much of a home to go to over break. And those were the kids that really just needed us to love them before they went home for 2 weeks. And it just you could tell it just broke their heart. It was continual punishment after punishment after punishment. And yeah, there were missing assignments, but there were a lot of things out of their control contributing to that as well. So anyways, long story short, I decided to volunteer for the homework classroom, and we did movies and whatnot on our own. Kind of bucked the system. They were getting pretty tired of me at that point because I just didn't stand for it. And then the other incident was it was in May. So I had my first child, Joey is her name, and it was her first birthday, and I requested her first birthday off, and my leave was denied. And because it was within the last month of school, apparently it was a policy that you can't take leave in the last month of school or something like that. And so it was at that point I was like, I need to step away from this. It doesn't feel right. I don't feel like this is where I need to be right now. I don't know where I need to be. So I quit at that point. And I stayed home for 2 years, and that was important and good. And we had another baby. And, but I always had that pull. I knew I was supposed to be into education, but I didn't know what that was supposed to look like. And then I had a former colleague from another school close by here call and say that she was resigning as principal at that school, and that was Bateson School. And she asked if I would apply. And in the meantime, I had gotten my master's in administration and my specialist degree. And so I was qualified for it on paper, didn't feel qualified for it in general because I was so young. I think I was 29 years old at the time. But I applied and I got the job. So after 2 years, I went back to work as a principal.
What did you, so how long did you do the principal job for? And like, what did you learn and focus on while you did that?
Yeah, so I was there, I was only there 2 years. Yeah, about 2 years, a little over. It was a great job. I loved that school. I love that school district. I love the community. And Bateson School is located on the reservation where I grew up, which it's one of, if not the poorest area in the entire United States. So with that sort of poverty comes a lot of other problems. I mean, social problems, addiction, abuse. Our kids were just experiencing a lot of really hard things. Yeah. But I was really excited to be a principal because I thought, you know what, I can make these changes. I can support teachers how they need to be supported. I can support kids how they need to be supported. But what I found was, yes, I could do those things, and we made a lot of progress, and I felt really good about it. But there was still just this immense pressure from higher up to turn out good test scores, and just such an emphasis on punishment rather than understanding children. And so it was hard beyond measure, but it was also a very good learning experience. But as far as like the stressful end of things with that, we have one of the highest child suicide rates in the nation as well. Oh. And we were dealing with that on a regular basis, attempts, and I never had a child actually go through, or I guess succeed in it. I don't know how to word that, but sure. We had a lot of attempts, and so just trying to stay ahead of that at all times, while also trying to appease all these regulations and these government requirements in the meantime. And there's a story I shared. It's kind of raw, but I think it's important to share because it was a very big turning point for me in my experience. And so it was I can't remember what time of year it was now that I'm thinking back, but we were in meetings with a company that was hired by the state to come in and basically tell our teachers how they can do better to make our test scores better, essentially. And a big part of that was our special education department. They wanted them, they were focusing on that. Mind you, the special education teachers I had at Batesland were some of the best teachers I have ever worked with. They were just phenomenal. But we were spending, I think this might have been our second day, I can't remember, in these meetings. And while we were in the meeting, my student advocate came in and she was very distraught, and I ran out in the hallway, and we had a child who had come to school. She was 12 years old. We hadn't seen her in probably 3 weeks, maybe longer. She had come to school to see her teachers. Her teachers were in this meeting, so she was sitting in the classroom with a para, which was fine. The para was a wonderful person. But I truly feel like she came to see her teachers and she didn't see them. And so she ended up going to the bathroom and she took a bunch of pills and attempted to take her own life.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So anyways, so I left the meeting, obviously. I went out in the hallway. I performed life-saving measures on her for quite a while. We're about 40 minutes from the nearest hospital. I waited for the ambulance. Got her to the hospital. She did live. But it was a very traumatic, life-altering experience to go through. And, after a few weeks of still struggling with it, I remember thinking, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a better way. And it shouldn't get to this point. And especially for, there's a substantial amount of kids that system just doesn't serve. There's some that it does, but there's a lot that it doesn't. And so it took me about it was another year before I actually resigned. But I worked on this idea of starting a school after that because I wanted something different.
And so that's that became Onward Learning, I assume,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, how's that set up differently? Like, what is Onward Learning, and how's it set up differently than a school?
So Onward Learning is very relationship based. We say we're love based. So when I was in the public school system, there's a lot of the system that focuses on more fear tactics. I felt like, or guilting kids into being good, or scaring them into doing what you need them to do with consequences. Whereas here we approach things with more of an understanding and a relationship focused mentality. We have multi-age classes, so I mean, I have kids that are 6 years old all the way up to 14-year-olds in some of our learning, and they support each other. We all support each other. It's more of a community. Our families support each other. It's small, so I know every single one of my kids on a very personal level. I know as soon as they walk through the door if there's something off, and we go and we sit, we talk about it. And so that's the biggest difference. We also, in the other system, there was a huge emphasis on math and reading, and that was pretty much the main focus. Whereas here we do teach a lot of math and reading, but we also teach art and music, and they do plays, and they build with woodwork. They do woodworking and pottery and just a lot of that, and a lot of recess time. That was the other problem I had was, 2 15-minute recesses all day doesn't cut it. And so we're outside. If it's nice out, we even take our books outside. We're very outdoorsy people.
Well, I think that's fabulous. I mean, we've homeschooled our kids, and I used to participate in a learning co-op that was geared towards boys, and it was very focused towards outdoor activity, learning the arts, a number of different things. But I think, I'll just be honest, I think our public school system and a lot of private schools are just missing the boat as to how to unleash kids and how they learn. I mean, there's so many studies out there that talk about, physical activity in between the learning really makes the learning much more impactful with kids, and kind of breaking up the day it just makes it so much more impactful. And I just love that you're kind of taking a different approach and being thoughtful about like meeting these kids where they are. I mean, that has to be so impactful. Like what kind of results have you seen, amongst your kids?
Yeah, and as far as meeting them where they're at, we also have a very personalized approach for every kid's learning. So we have kids come to us all the time at just varying levels, and there's different gaps in their learning, or maybe they're advanced and they've been held back because they're not allowed to go beyond. So we've had lots of success, but we've had students that come maybe 2 grade levels behind, and they've made up a grade level in a half a year. Or we've had I have a 6-year-old right now who she's end of 1st grade in everything. And she's pretty young for that. I have we have a couple of children that weren't identified with dyslexia until they came to us, and now they're getting the support they need. I have one who was getting in fights at his other school, not going to school, just really, really struggling with emotional regulation due to some trauma in his life, and he hasn't been suspended once here, or any serious behavior incidences here, and he rarely misses school, and he's working hard, and he's excited about learning and being here. I have another who very ADHD, but super, super smart, and he was the problem child, and now he's a leader here, and he's another one that's a grade level ahead in all of his academics. So it's been fun to be able to tailor it based upon what each kid needs and family needs and wants.
And to be clear, the student population that you're drawing from, is it still the folks on or near the reservation who are in some of the poorest areas of the country?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. And we have sort of a mix here, but about 90% of our kids are tribally enrolled. And we have some that are, rancher farmer families, and then we have some who live on the reservation. We have some who live in town, but we're all in the same community, in the same areas. Yep.
Wow. Is there anything that like if you're talking to other folks who are gonna start a school or some sort of education program, what kind of advice would you give them? Is there anything in particular that you'd really ask them to hone in on?
I think just don't question yourself. That was I think my biggest obstacle was sort of the imposter syndrome thing. And, there's a lot of people out there doing this. I didn't realize it at the time. I felt like I was on an island. And then I started going, I went to a conference in DC for the VELA Fund. And then we were the YAS Prize semifinalists this year. And so I got to connect with a bunch of people through that. And this is being done everywhere. And you can find somebody that's doing what you want to do. You just got to reach out. I sent cold emails, and I have had some amazing mentors because of that. So yeah, I guess my biggest advice is to stay confident, stay true to yourself, and reach out for help, because there are others doing this. The National Microschooling Center is a great resource. I'd be happy to help or direct you somewhere that can help you. And do it, because this is the future of education. I really believe this is the future of education.
I agree. So you mentioned the VELA Fund. So a lot of folks probably aren't aware of the VELA Fund. I mean, what is the VELA Fund, and how has it helped you?
Yeah, so the VELA Fund is great. They have what they call a micro grant, and it's a $10,000 grant to help you get going. And we received that. I applied for it once, didn't get it. I applied for it again, and we did get it. So even if you do apply and you don't get it, reapply. But it's more than just that seed funding. It's a whole network of people and support. I went to their conference in Washington, D.C. this last summer, and it was phenomenal. It was one of the best conferences I'd been to. And then once you get the micro grant, then you're eligible to apply for a next step grant, which we didn't get this time around, but I'm going to reapply. But that's substantially more. But being a part of that network is a big deal. And I think they actually just opened up their applications for the micro grants. So,
oh, great. Yeah, I mean, VELA, it's been part of our community here. I think we really see it as potentially the future of, helping to drive the future of education. That, people, particularly parents, picking like what's the best solution for their kids' education, and then empowering those kind of education entrepreneurs like yourself, really, to be able to go and start something that addresses the needs of the kids in your community or in your family or whatever. And so, so often the barrier to entry on that, or being able to start something, is a smallish amount of money. Mm-hmm. And so, if you can get a little bit of a step up there through grants, and then all the expertise that's available, and, the peers that you can talk to about, how do you do this? Because it is intimidating. I think that's a pretty fabulous offering.
Yeah, absolutely. It was one of the trajectory changing moments is getting to be a part of that network, for sure.
Yeah, I found a lot of people, like I said, we're part of a homeschool community, and there's a lot of folks who just need that little boost of confidence. It's like, hey, your kids, you care deeply about them, and you want what's best for them, and you're capable of educating them a lot of times. Mm-hmm. Or another starting a school. My kids happen to be in a little bit of a micro school also that, I meet a few days a week. And, it's these moms who are super smart. I mean, one of the moms who does the teaching has a Yale law school degree, but she's been homeschooling her kids, and she's helping teach our kids. And I think just people coming together and having the confidence to say, no, I really can do this, and kind of figure out what's best with my kids. Because, man, so often the public school system is such a top-down entity, and it treats a lot of kids not as individuals. And there's reasons for that, but it's not what we would choose for our kids. So I give a lot of credit for being able to step out and do something for kids who seem to really need it.
Yeah. And I guess one other part I didn't mention is I wanted to do this for my own kids too. I saw my oldest, starting to struggle even just in preschool, and I just decided I was going to do something different for them. I wanted them to have something similar to what I had, and just to get them off on the right foot. I wanted to protect, a big part of what we do is protecting the innocence of childhood too, and I wanted them to be able to be kids and to not have to worry about that mess out there, And then since then, we've discovered that she's severely dyslexic, and I'm convinced that probably wouldn't have been identified, early on as I'm her teacher, so I was able to identify it and get her the support she needs, and that was more further validation, personally, in this whole process.
Wow, that's fabulous. I'm glad you're able to do that.
Me too.
Well, Mary Jo, I really appreciate I appreciate what you're doing. I just personally have a passion for folks who step out and, kind of create different solutions to educating kids, because I think it's the future for our country and it's so important. So, thanks for coming on and talking about it. And, I'd encourage folks to, check out Onward Learning and understand what they're doing, and, or link up with the VELA Fund if you're interested in pursuing, a micro grant, or, trying to even just learn about how you can do this in your community and for your kids. I think that there is a community out there that'll support you and give you all kinds of emotional, intellectual, and financial support. So it's something that you can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks again, Mary Jo. I really appreciate it. This is such an inspiring story. Folks, it's really, empowering parents to, figure out the best way that their kids can receive an education is really a core part of what we do as a community, and is something that we really want to encourage. And having folks like Mary Jo who are doing that, and it can be an example, is really inspiring. Liberty and freedom are easily taken for granted. Don't take it for granted. Go out there and defend freedom and liberty. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for listening to American Potential. You may listen to more stories from Americans working every day to expand freedom and opportunity in their communities by visiting AmericanPotential.com.